I'll get things kicked off with the first topic here for tonight, folks, which is talking about coach homes. Now, we're fairly limited on time here, so I'm going to give you some examples. I wish I could spend, and I could spend hours and hours and hours on this topic. Patrick knows I don't get up and start speaking very long that I don't start talking about coach homes, because I really do believe, as a real estate investor, that coach homes are going to be an incredible landslide opportunity for most people that know what they're doing in the space, that have the right property, that are purchasing the right property, that can add a coach home to their portfolio and to their existing properties. This is going to be a monumental opportunity for you in the next 1, 3, 5, 10 years. And I'll explain it like this, and many of you will be able to relate to this because you all went through this. You remember in 2012, 2013, 2014, 2011, 2012, 2013, when the idea of a secondary suite, an accessory suite, just started. Remember, if some of you have been around a long time, you remember that didn't exist before, right? Like, a single family home was a single family home. Like, accessory suites didn't always exist. There was some legislation that was passed, and as a result of this legislation, it allowed us as investors to kind of circumvent the zoning rules. And as a result, we were able to add secondary suites and make our single family homes into duplexes or single family plus accessory suites. And that really, if you think about it, how many of you use that as an investment tactic going forward, where you had a single family home that was X cash flow, whether it was cash flow positive or cash flow neutral, or maybe even cash flow negative, and you were like, oh my God, I'm going to put a few bucks into this property and I'm going to turn it into a duplex or 2 units that are going to generate way more revenue than a single family. So, and if you guys haven't been investing, for some of you haven't been investing long enough, that wasn't always the case. This has been a phenomenon that's really happened over the last 10 years, give or take, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less, depending on your province. But this is what's been happening. And it's been an incredible opportunity. And those people that took advantage of this opportunity early on had a huge, huge, huge first mover advantage. I started doing single family with accessory suites when I first started investing in real estate in 2010. And people didn't really quite know. They didn't know how to navigate the bylaws. They didn't know how to navigate the zoning. And as a result, some people are just starting to work that strategy now. Meanwhile, many of us listening to this have actually had those properties in our portfolios for 10 plus years. Some of them are completely paid off. Some people miss that whole runway there, okay? And that's what's important to realize when it comes to these kinds of things, these kinds of opportunities, is there is a period of time where I believe the real beginning is a little messy. And by the way, we're there with coach homes now. I'll speak to that in a second. The real beginning of these opportunities are messy. The next kind of part, right after we get through the messiness, that the next couple of years, 2, 3, 4 years, has a huge first mover advantage. And then the rest of the market kind of catches up. And then what happens is those who've taken advantage of the first mover advantage get handsomely rewarded, because the market value of those properties, really the wind is in your sails, if you will. And as a result, you get handsomely rewarded. This happened with secondary suites. This will happen with coach homes. Mark my words. This is happening right now with coach homes, which is why I've been telling you guys for a year now, and we're in that messy period right now because we're in the first year of all this happening, but this is happening with coach homes. But I want to rewind this a little bit and kind of start from the beginning and explain what the heck is a coach home, what does it mean, and let's start right from the beginning, okay? The first thing to understand, and the question I'm always working from, is why a coach home may be the best use of capital in your portfolio. Because a lot of you are looking to grow your portfolio, and you're often, people are, the only way to do it is to buy another property. And the question is buying another property the best use of your capital? and I want to show you, and this is going to be kind of a, I think I'll end up doing this in a multi-part series as clarity, as kind of we work with most of you to do this. I'll do this in a multi-part series. Let's start tonight with part one. So the first kind of question to ask and answer is, what's a coach home? And I refer to them as coach homes. I don't know, I got attached to that word. I like it, rolls off the tongue nice. But there's many different ways of referring. They're referred to as many things. They're referred to as, and they're also known as carriage houses. They're also known as secondary suites or granny flats or accessory dwelling unit, an ADU, which is kind of usually what shows up in the legislation, by the way. So be familiar with the ADU or accessory dwelling unit, or in Toronto, for example, they refer to them as laneway houses. Laneway houses is really a Toronto, Vancouver, phenomenon. But here in Peterborough, for example, we don't talk to them about laneway houses because there's not a whole lot of laneways here. What these are is these are smaller dwellings that exist on the same property as a larger house. So most often it's in the backyard. Okay, and I will show you actual samples of deals that I've done and coach homes I've built in the last year. And I couldn't do all the ones I've done in the last year. I can only do a sample. But I want to show you how you're literally building these in the backyard of a property you already own. So that's where we start. It's a property you already own. I'll show you some examples. And you're going to build another structure in the backyard or in the side yard or on the existing property. So you're not buying another property. You're not severing a property. That's really important. A lot of people think you're going to sever a property to pull this off. You're not severing a property here. You are actually building it on the existing property, and you're going to have two dwellings on the same property. Okay. And yes, zoning, we'll speak to zoning in a second, to Keith's point, because every municipality is going to have their own bylaws and their own language. So you got to get familiar with your particular municipality. I'll use language that I'm familiar with because of where I operate. But you definitely got to get familiar with the one where you're operating. Oops. So let's start with some examples. Okay. Patrick, you're muted, by the way.
The one thing I want to just point out to everybody, and it's starting to happen. So what the zoning changes that were made in Ontario are also happening in British Columbia in just as big a way, even in some regards in a bigger way. This is going to start to roll out, really, I think, across the country, short of maybe Saskatchewan, Manitoba, like as in Winnipeg, Regina, maybe, because they don't have the same densification issues that we have. The point of it all is what JG is presenting here today is where some real opportunities are going to exist for investors who are on top of it and can actually look into the future and see that particular property in that particular neighborhood and understand what that will mean from a zoning perspective. I just wanted to add that for additional context, I guess.
Yeah, and I'll get to, I was going to speak to the rest of the country in a second. I just want everyone to have some examples and to put some meat on the bone, because not everyone knows what a coach home is, but you're absolutely right, Patrick. So let's get into some examples. How does this materialize in your portfolio? Because if I'm sitting in your shoes, based on what you own, you might own one property, two properties, five properties, whatever the case may be. How can you build a coach home? By the way, a coach home, or I'll just continue to refer to them as coach homes, but you guys know what I mean now. They're not right for every property, and you shouldn't just cram it on your property because you can. That's important. If it doesn't fit within the property, and if it doesn't fit properly, and I'll show you some designs and I'll show you some measurements. If it doesn't fit properly, it could actually hurt the overall building, if you will, right? And I'll give you a good example. Patrick often uses this example. Actually, 2 years ago, Patrick was talking about this, where usually in a hot market, when things are really, really hot, investors buy anything and buy everything. and it looks like geniuses. Everything looks fantastic. So you buy, you buy that property that's right beside a gas station that has a big dumpster in the backyard that seems to be okay when the market's at, is at really, really hot. But then the market slows down, the rent starts to cool off a little bit, and all of a sudden your property is the first one that's vacant, and you're the one that's having the most difficult time renting your property because it's a bad location, it's got no good amenities, whatever the case may be. If you go jam a coach home in on a good let's say you have a really nice duplex right now and you go jam a coach home in the backyard just for the sake of having a third unit, and it kind of interrupts the whole flow of all three units, now you're going to have a problem renting all three units. So I just want to be careful that I'm the number one fan of coach homes, but I don't think you should just jam them wherever you can just because you can. I think they have to fit within the profile of the property, and I think the setup has to be right. And I'll show you some examples of what I mean by that. So here's one example, and this is this property is incredible. This here was done just outside of Peterborough. This was literally, and I know you guys are gonna laugh, and I wish it was a live audience because then I could see your laughter. But this was literally a horse barn. I'm not kidding you. This was a horse barn. Back in the day, this property was a big, beautiful, old house, and there was a horse barn in the backyard close to the house. And this is not a property that I own, but this is one of our clients at Visture. They called us and they said, hey, we'd like to turn this barn essentially into a coach house. And I said, okay. So I went to go look at it. And the reason I show this picture here is literally we took out the two front swing gates, like the carriage, the barn doors, if you will. And we built in some, we had to reframe this entire thing. And I'll show you the finished product. This is what it turned out to be in the end, is what you're looking at right there. And this is a good example of a coach home that fits really, really well. I mean, there's lots of ample parking. The building was already there, which is great. A lot of you are in a position where you have a garage and you're thinking, can I convert this garage into a rental? With some of the, and we'll speak to the provincial laws and the bylaws in a second, but with some of these upcoming changes in zoning, and you can actually do this. You can convert your garages, you can convert these other buildings into rentals. And that's one of the ways, without even having to add a building, a lot of you could add rental income. And some of you have already been doing this. Some of you have been doing this illegally, by the way. Now, good news, you could do it legally. But this is a good example of us turning literally a horse barn into a coach house. And just to give you an example of numbers, this on the left there is a single family home. And that single family home rents for $3,000 a month. And this coach home back here rents for $2,200 a month. Okay, so total you have $5,200 a month on the same piece of land where previously we were only renting it for $3,000 a month. So we almost doubled the rent we were able to get from this property by adding this coach home. And roughly, and I got to give you guys rough numbers, but the cost to do that coach home all in was I think just under $200,000, about $185,000 if I remember right, in order to convert a horse barn into a coach home. But what's important to realize there is sometimes people think, oh, that must be easier than building from scratch. That's not always the case. And this is a good example. I wish I had more pictures to show you. I just don't have them accessible on this laptop, but we actually had to actually build footings in this property because of building a horse barn. And the way to build a horse barn is very different than how you build a home. If you're going to have a home where someone's going to live, you actually have to bring it up to code and up to construction standards. So we actually had to put footings in this building. They didn't have footings before. The floor was literally a dirt floor. We had to excavate all that out. We had to actually pour a slab in there. So just keep in mind that some of these construction projects can be quite quite involved sometimes. but the ROI on this is incredible. And here's where the ROI always, and if you're taking notes, hopefully you are, here's some of the notes you want to take advantage of, which is when you do a coach home, one of the things you get to save right away, especially in Ontario, is the development charges, which I'll speak about in a second. Because of that, because you save the development charges, because you don't have to buy new land, you already own the land, those two things alone can really tip the scales on the return on investment in your favor. And in this example, we have 2 income generating units on one plot of land, a coach home and a single family home. And the question you're asking yourself is, well, JG, can you convert that home into a duplex? And the answer is yes. So now you can convert that single family into a duplex, and now you have 3 income generating units. And if we did that, you'd be able to generate essentially the main floor of that home would rent for about $2,300. The lower unit of that home would rent for about $1,900, and that coach home would continue to rent for $2,200. So what's the math on that? Someone do it real quick for me. 23 plus 19 is 52 plus 22. What's that? 74. So you're talking about $7,400 of rent from a single plot of land. Tony, great question. What about parking? So parking, yeah, you have to abide by the parking bylaws. Every municipality has different parking bylaws, but by and large, let me tell you what it is in Ontario. Most places, again, check your municipality, is for a single family, for the first residence, you need 2 parking. For the next accessory dwelling, hey, that's funny. Look at my balloons. For the next accessory suite, you need a 3rd parking, and for the coach home, you need a 4th parking. So you need 4 parking stalls. Even 2 tandem can do the trick. And in this case, we already had the parking. We didn't have to do any extra parking. That's one of the big benefits of the new laws that were passed in Ontario, is that they've really loosened up some of these parking requirements. And some of this is filtering down to the municipalities. I'll speak to that in a second. So I just want to give you guys a vision of what these coach homes look like, and the kind of revenue they can generate for your portfolio is massive. Susan, great question. Square footage on that coach home, this one here was 1,350 square feet of living space. This was a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom coach home. 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom. It has a den, and it had a really nice living space, and it actually has a really nice deck off the back that we built as well. Right? Yeah, very, very good. By the way, keep putting your questions in there, folks, and I'm happy to answer as much as I can. Oh, prefab ADUs, Brent. I'll talk to that in a second. I got lots to talk about there. Okay, so there's an example of what I'll call a retrofit, where you're retrofitting an existing building into a coach home, which is cool. Here's another example. Big horse barn, yeah. Well, 13. It was actually, so the horse barn would have been 650 square feet, Susan. The footprint was 650 square feet, but we actually were able to go up and make it a 1.5 story, which is what gave us our 1,300 square feet in this case. Okay, this one here is a new build. This is what I'll call a purpose-built coach home. And a purpose-built coach home is something that you are going to literally excavate and build in the backyard or the side yard of an existing property that you own, and you're going to build a brand new purpose-built rental. This is one that we did. This one here, funny enough, is 1,350 square feet as well, or just about 1,400 square feet. It has a 700 square feet footprint, and it's got 2 stories. I'll show you the finished product in a second. Full basement, 8-foot ceilings. Full main floor, 8-foot ceilings, cathedral. So at one point, I think they're 11 feet. And this again is a this is a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home. This will rent for somewhere between $2,500 and $2,700. This one is in Lindsay, Ontario. And yeah, so very, very good. This one here was interesting, and if you I don't know how much time I got. I don't want to go into too much detail because I can geek out on the construction of these things. But when it comes to bylaws, one of the biggest bylaws you're going to have to contend with when it comes to coach homes is the height requirement. You can only go so high. In Peterborough, the midspan of the roof can only be, I believe I forget how many meters, but it's essentially just under 15 feet. And that requirement often, if you want to get the square footage, you often have to bring your building down a little bit so you can do a full 2-story. And that's what this particular client want. Again, this is a client build. This isn't one that I own. This is a client that wanted this done. So we did the basement and we built it out of ICF, which is insulated concrete forms. If you guys don't know what that is, and we did the top out of some new construction material called Harmonics. Is essentially a foam. Very, very cool. You can see his other building on the right-hand side there. That is a single-family home that we are currently converting into a duplex. So we took a single-family student rental and we converted it to essentially a triplex by converting the single-family into a duplex up and down. 3-bedroom on the upper, 3-bedroom on the lower, and converting this to and well, not converting, but doing this purpose built. And this is just showing you some construction pics as we've been going here. And that's actually as of I think that was yesterday. And we're putting the sod down. We're going to have this thing rented essentially by the end of the month. So let me give you Max. I'll talk about costs in a second, Max. It's a great question. I know that's on everyone's question. We'll talk about costs in a second, but let's look at this particular property. So here you have a student rental. Okay, it used to be 6 bedrooms. That one house was 6 bedrooms. Each bedroom rented for roughly $600. Okay, student rental. What's that? $3,600. So that plot of land made $3,600 back in the day. So now we've separated. So the upper's a 3-bedroom. We're going to rent that upper unit for about $2,200. We're going to rent the lower unit for $1,900. So what's that? That's $5,100. We're going to rent that coach home for, like I said, $2,500 to $2,700. So that's $5,100 plus $2,500. That's $7,600. So anytime you're going to go to that 3-unit in a coach home, you're gonna start bringing in revenues of up above 7,000 into the close to 8,000s, depending on your area. And again, of course, you got to look at your own market and so on and so forth. But so far, that's what I've seen with the projects I've done. You're typically getting into there. Okay, we'll talk about appraisals. We'll actually talk about appraisals. I'll bring Dahlia on after, and we'll talk about appraisals for coach homes in a minute. So Brent, that's a great question. So just think about that, folks, because I know that's the first question you guys are going in your mind is, okay, number one, how much is it going to cost? Number two, how much is it going to generate? And that so far is kind of the numbers that we've seen. Now, this is a perfect example of a property that absolutely deserved a coach home. It's on a corner lot, good sized property on a corner lot with a secondary driveway, piece of cake. I mean, really absolutely deserved it. And has gone incredibly, it'll be an incredible project, and it's just about finishing. It'll be done essentially in a week or two. Now, let me show you another one this one's more complicated. So this is the sketch. And here's, again, you got to look into these bylaws for yourselves. But in Peterborough, there's essentially a couple, and Lindsay has, the city of Kawartha Lakes, they have their own municipality, their own bylaws. Peterborough has their own bylaws. Bowmanville, Oshawa, Durham region, they have their own bylaws. Everyone's got to check their own bylaws, because there's no way I can do a presentation and summarize everyone's bylaws. But by and large, people are all starting to congregate, and they're all going to start following the same methods, by the way, or roughly the same methods. And here it is in Peterborough. So this gives you an idea of how to start thinking about this. In Peterborough, if you're going to build a coach home, the footprint of the coach home can only be a maximum of 10% of the lot size. So that's why on the left-hand side, you see my calculation there. That lot is 58 feet wide by 112 feet deep. That's 6,500 square feet. That immediately tells me my footprint, my floor plate can be no more than 650 square feet. Okay, that's the first kind of caveat to this. Because when you know your lot size, and everybody knows their own lot size, you could say, okay, I have a lot size of say 5,000 square feet. Well, if you have a lot of 5,000 square feet and you have to keep your floor print, your floor plate at 10% of that, that's a 500 square foot footprint. Well, that's interesting. But can you build enough value in 500 square feet to make it make sense? I can tell you in Peterborough, I'm not going to rent stuff for 500 square feet. You might be able to rent that stuff in Hamilton and in Oakville and in Mississauga and in Toronto. They'll rent that stuff all day long because the demand is there. No one in Peterborough is renting 500 square foot footprint. There's just not the demand there is in kind of that really southern GTA region. That's just giving you a little bit about my market. You have to figure it out for your market is what I'm saying. But this one here isn't a corner lot. This has a primary dwelling right across the whole thing with a carport. And this particular client's looking to build an ADU or a coach home in the backyard. Now, what's interesting about this one is it actually does work because, and here's a shot of it. And as you can see, his current duplex, this is a current investor. This duplex takes up the entire width, like the entire width of the property is taken. But on the right-hand side there, that's a carport. So we're actually going to take that carport off in order to create, a thoroughfare in order to get to that backyard. But what works about this backyard, and I wish you could see this, is it's got a really aggressive slope to it. So here's where, to me, a coach home makes sense in a backyard. If that coach home is going to feel like a little cottage, and you're talking about there's a lot of Albertans on the call here tonight. There's a lot of people that know what I'm talking about when I say it's going to feel like a cottage. If you're going to pop a house in the middle of a subdivision backyard, I'm not sure that's going to work. But if you're going to have this really nice design property, and I'll show you what this one's going to be because we're working on this one now. If it's going to feel like a cottage, if it's going to feel like a bit of a getaway, that's going to be premium. And this is what we're seeing more and more as we go down this path with coach homes. And I'll show you what we're going to be building here. So here's the site plan, as you can see. So we're going to be adding a parking in front of the other parking. We're going to be adding another parking. We're going to be creating, essentially right here, you can see my cursor. We're going to be creating a path here. This is going to be the coach home here, which is going to have a 650 square foot footprint. And we're going to be going up 1.5 stories. Why are we doing that? Because we have to stay below that height, that maximum height. So we're going to be, and I'll come back to the floor print in a second, but here's an image of what it's going to look like. Now you get a sense of what I mean by a little cottage, right? Really, really cool design. And you're going to walk in, big, beautiful garden doors. I'll show you the floor print in a second. You can see the side. You're going to have lots of light coming in from the top. You got those 4 big windows on the one side, 4 big windows on the other side. It's going to, and you could see this is designed really, really well. This is what's important with coach homes. You got to think about this stuff. Keep in mind, it's in a backyard, right? So if you go put, in this case, we put all the windows at the top. Why? So that we can get the maximum amount of light in, so it feels really, really good in there. But you're not like, you don't want people to feel like they're in a fishbowl in someone's backyard. That's just not going to rent well. You got to think about this as an investor. So we put the windows at the top to let the light in, but not make it feel like a fishbowl. So this is an example here. Also, those landscape windows here at the top, at the bottom, you could see those. Keep in mind, those are, essentially at head height. So they offer people privacy, but they offer people a view out. So people can see out, but nobody can essentially see, you wouldn't be able to see essentially from the neck down, you wouldn't be able to see. So it gives people privacy. Point is, you got to design with that in mind, which comes back to Brent. I'll speak to prefab in a minute. But we do right now, we're doing a lot of custom purpose-built coach homes. And the reason for that is prefabs have not shown to be cheaper. In fact, they've shown to be more expensive. And what we've noticed is we can actually design a better product that's going to be better suited for rental, and it'll actually be cheaper than prefab. So that's why we're not doing prefab yet. But even if you are going to go down the prefab road, make sure it's designed properly for a rental. Because the idea here is you want to maximize your ROI. If you're gonna do a coach home and it's gonna be difficult to rent, keep in mind this is actually a really good example. This place here, you have currently a duplex, which is in good shape. It's in a great location. If we do this right, the ROI on this property will go through the roof. If you do it wrong, you'll screw up all 3 units. The duplex will be more difficult to rent, and that coach home will be more difficult to rent. As a result, in the hot markets, you'll be a genius, as Patrick says. But when it gets tough and when the rental market gets softer, you'll be the first one that'll be empty. So you got to do it right, and you got to think about the rental component of it. Let me show you the inside design of this real quick, which is, so you walk in right here. Check this out. You walk in here. Big open concept living area, kitchen island, kitchen's right here, living room's right here. Immediately primary bedroom on the lower, bathroom right here. We do our utility. In this case we're debating. In this case, we're going to do probably slab on grade. So we're not going to be building a crawl space, which is why we're putting all of our utilities in this utility space right here, which is closed off on the other side of the bathroom. If you were doing a crawl space, you might put the utilities down there. In this case, we're doing slab on grade, so we're not planning to do that. But as you walk in the main door here, you come up the stairs and check it out. This is upstairs. This is all open to below because it's a 1.5 story. You got that second bedroom up here, which is absolutely massive with an ensuite. And you got the storage area back here. You got all those big windows. Remember those 4 big windows I showed you? Window 1, window 2, window 3, window 4. Same thing on this side. All that light is flooding in and really giving this a ton of light. But you have a ton of privacy on that main floor because there's no windows on the main floor. You're getting all that light and you're getting all the view looking up. So pretty cool. A lot of thought has gone into the design of these things. But that's an example of another purpose-built coach home that's being put literally in the backyard, not a corner lot, literally being put in the backyard. Brent, that's a really good question. Why that storage area that way? This actually explains it here. So these dormers, and I didn't put the full construction drawings here, but these dormers here, essentially, there, you see it here? See this space right here, Brent? The reason that you put, let me go back, this space here is because these dormers right here, this space is essentially wasted space on the inside. From here to here is going to be wasted on the inside. The bedroom is from here to here because the roof comes up, right? You got your peak of your roof. Therefore, this is all going to be made into storage. Hopefully you know what I mean, Brent. That's why it's done that way. Okay, Patrick, I'm almost done, I think. Until I start answering questions. I get all geeky on this stuff. You know how I get. So here's some examples of prefab, okay? Again, the square footage is really, really important. You got to make sure that wherever you're renting, your rental area can handle these sizes. A lot of the prefab stuff, the reason the prefabs have not taken off yet is the prefabs are expensive. I have seen prefabs right now. I'm seeing prefab prices at somewhere between $400 to $500+ per square foot. That is too expensive for me. I can build it. Okay, right now we are building, and our goal is to build these for about $250 a square foot. Right now we're building them for about $300 a square foot, roughly, and $300, $325-ish Depends. The land it sits on is really important. The setup of the yard is really important. If it's basic, if it's easy, we can push it down to 300. If it gets complicated, it goes up into the 300s. But our goal is to get these below into the 200s. And until these prefabs get down below 300, I'm not interested in the prefabs. Only because I can do it. I can do it cheaper. And what I've noticed is the prefabs, you still got to do a slab, you still got to do your footings, there's still a lot of pre-work that has to be done. So they're not saving me a whole lot of time, and they're costing me more money. Right now, it's not there yet. But it's gonna get there, by the way. And we're doing some really creative stuff at Visture, where we are actually prefabbing parts of our coach homes so that we can actually assemble them in a manufacturing facility and then assemble them on site really, really fast. In fact, one of the ones we did last year, we went from a hole in the ground. We went from a foundation to a completely closed-in building in about 2.5 days because it was prefabbed offsite, and then we assembled it on site, and it went really, really well. So we're going to be doing a lot more of this as we go forward, so that we can do two things. And this is my goal at Visture, and it should also be your goal as an investor, which is I want to go from, get this, I want to go from an idea to fully rented in 90 days. So I want Dahlia to call me and say, JG, I think I have a plot of land that can use a coach home. Come and look. I will go take a look. And if she says, and if I say, yep, we could do it here, within 90 days, that coach home is built and it's rented. Okay, I think we could do it. I know we can do it, and we've gotten close. We're working our way there. We haven't done it yet in 90 days, but that's our goal. And we need some technology to come into place in order for us to be able to hit that goal. But imagine if we can go, and that's 90 days, by the way. Sorry, I misspoke. That's 90 days from the time I have your permit. Okay, so from the time, so Dahlia gives me the go ahead. I have the plans. I submit the plans. I get the permit. From the day I get going, 90 days later, it's rented and it's done. And then, one day, I'm hoping that Visture is going to actually finance that for investors as well. Anyways, that's a little bit of where we're going with this. The point is that it could be a game changer for a lot of investors because as the numbers I showed you, they're absolutely incredible. Okay. Let me see, just going to get some questions. The supply and pricing for prefab will catch up when demand picks up. Yeah, you're right, Susan. I think it's a little bit of cat and mouse with prefab right now. They're waiting for demand to catch up. Demand is waiting for supply, and demand is actually waiting for the price to come down. So there's a bit of cat and mouse going on with that. We'll see where it all shakes out. I'll speak to the various municipalities here in just a second because I know that's a lot of people's questions. But yeah, has this been good, by the way? Put it in the chat. Has this been a good example and a good explanation of coach homes? Are you getting the sense of what this can be for you and how this can work with you in your portfolio? Just put it in the chat. Love to hear from you if this has been good. Now the first thing to really, and I'm gonna, now that you have a picture, and this is the last part of this, and it's the most difficult part, it's the legal component of it. And what I mean by the legal component of it is I want everyone to understand how this stuff comes about. And right now what's happening is, and it all started with Ontario, and if you watch us on YouTube, and if you watch us on Facebook, and if you follow us, I've been shouting this from the rooftops for a year now, saying that what Ontario did a year ago was brilliant and every other province would follow. And that's exactly what's happened. That's what's happening. It's not all done yet, but that's what's happening. And essentially what's happening is in Ontario, I think it's Bill 23, if I remember correctly, when that got royal assent, so the province passed laws that essentially are forcing municipalities and their bylaws to adapt to the provincial laws. And the reason, and by the way, it's still in the messy phase right now, but the reason that I know how this plays out is because this is what happened with secondary suites. the provinces updated their official plans, and that forces the municipalities to update their bylaws to meet the official plan of the provinces. And what the province does is the province gives the municipalities a deadline and says, your bylaws have to be updated by such and such time in order to meet our provincial legislation. Now, what has happened in Ontario is Ontario has taken a really aggressive stance. My hat's off to Doug Ford, because I think it was by and large very popular in this room with investors, but by and large unpopular is what the provincial legislation has done now is it's essentially overriding some of these municipal bylaws, right? The municipalities haven't even updated their zoning yet. And you're able to do this because their legislation overrides the municipalities, right? So this is important for you to understand, and you need, every single one of you need to look into your municipalities. If you're in Peterborough, I know it really well, and we can chat. If you're in Lindsay, City of Kawartha Lakes, I know it really well, we can chat. But if you're in Ottawa, if you're in Hamilton, if you're wherever you are, every municipality is reacting differently to this. Let me give you a perfect example. Legislation in Ontario says any R1 or R2 zone property, which means a single family, that's R1, or a duplex rated lot, that's an R2. Doesn't matter if it's R1, R2, you're allowed as of right. Those are important words, by the way. You should write those down, as of right. That means it is your right by owning that piece of land that has an R1 or R2 zoning as of right. You're able to put 3 units on there, no matter the zoning. That's how the provincial legislation overrides the municipal bylaws. Okay, that's how it happens. Now, this as of right is really, really important, but some municipalities are going beyond it. They're and I love it. It's great. Like Hamilton said, listen, we really need housing. The province has said 3 units. We're saying 4 units. So if you hit certain criteria in Hamilton, and they have their own criteria, you can actually do 4 units, which means a triplex and a coach home, or 2 duplexes, as an example. You can have up to 4 units on a property. In Vancouver recently, Patrick, remind me, I believe in some areas, depending on where you're, it's 6 units, right, Patrick? Yeah.
All driven by the size of the lot, all based on the footprint of the lot.
Correct. So, and this is important because, and by the way, Edmonton, if I remember right, Patrick, Edmonton was the first municipality who said, listen, we're not even, by the way, Alberta hasn't adopted this. Alberta as a province has not adopted this yet from my knowledge, but Edmonton has taken their own approach, and they've rewritten their bylaws because they know it's coming. So every municipality is going about this differently. Some of them are being forced by their provinces. Some of them are getting ahead of their provinces. So go have a look into your municipality and what they're doing. And that's really important. Let me just take some questions here, and then I'll keep going. Yes, I like what Denise and Stuart are saying, and it's so true. And by the way, in Peterborough, let me back up. In 2010, when, roughly 2010, when the official plan was amended, and the province said by 2016, every municipality in Ontario has to update their bylaws to meet the official plan in order to allow secondary suites. That's what the province said. I think it was in 2010, and I believe their deadline was 2016, or roughly thereabouts. I think it was 2019, and Peterborough still not had done it. My point there is that it may take municipalities a long time to update their bylaws. But what's different about the legislation that passed is because it's as of right, now it's your right. So you don't have to, you can still, this is the messy part. This is where you have to work with your city, and you have to push this stuff through. And we're going to have to, as a community, we're going to have to do this. The more of us that push for these projects, it forces the city to consider these things and to get in line. But in Ontario, they have to abide by this because it's now provided as of right. Okay, so that's a really good point, Denise and Stuart. It looks, Gary says it looks Rental demands as before. I have 4 properties vacant. Okay, got it. Gary's asking a question about rentals. I'm not seeing this problem at all, Gary.
I think
But
there is a some, just to cover Gary's point, because it might be a question out there for others. It's something that we are seeing is that right now we're hitting a ceiling of limitation in terms of what tenants are willing to pay. So, to your point, if you're not getting the demand or you're not getting the inquiries, you may be just priced too high right now, and you may have to come down a little bit, depending. You're talking about Belleville, JG, or maybe some of the other members would know that area better than I do. But you will hit a ceiling of limitation if you try and push those rents too hard.
Yep, 100%. I've had to bring rents down 50, $100 recently because we were just a little bit too much at the top of the curve. So yes, 100% agree with you, Patrick, for sure. All those units filled, by the way. So good point. So, and I just want to kind of wrap up here because I could talk about this all night, but we're going to move on. I want to wrap up by saying where we are in the process is, and then I'll bring Dahlia on to talk about the appraisals of these coach homes. But where we are in the process right now is in Ontario, this is exactly 1 year old. It was November 28th, 2022 that this had royal assent and became legislation. So it's essentially one year old. So we're really at the beginning of this thing, and it's still very messy in the municipalities. Okay. There's only a few municipalities where there's an actual track to run on. And believe it or not, Peterborough's done a decent job, and they have published their coach home bylaws and said, okay, if you want to build a coach home, you have to meet these following criteria. It can't be more than 10% of the size of the floor plate cannot be more than 10% the size of the lot. It can't be more than just under 15 feet tall. It has to, the setbacks have to be 1.2 meters, which is just over 3 feet or just under 3 feet, about 3 feet from the side yard, the backyard, and you have to be at least 4 meters away from the current property. If you meet those basic things, you can put a coach home, and so, and the city of Kawartha Lakes, by the way, as well, has a very good established path. So they're all starting to release their coach home bylaws and the ADU bylaws. So you should start by meeting with your municipality, Googling it, checking out their website, seeing if they've put anything out officially that you can review, and then kind of go from there. What's important is again, the as of right in Ontario is really important because that puts the ball in your court. They can't challenge you. You can keep pushing them on it because it is your right. The other thing that's important is the development charges. That's a huge deal. I've done purpose-built rentals for over 10 years now. The development charges on a purpose-built duplex can be $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. You don't have that. You don't have to pay that when you're doing a coach home. That's a lot of dough that's in your pocket. That's a big deal. And the other thing that's part of the More Homes Built Faster Act is the reduced site plan control. So back in the day when you wanted to do a development, even if it's a purpose-built duplex, even if it was a coach home, you'd have a list of things that you'd have to submit. These are called site plan controls, a variety of studies and all these things that you'd have to do. A lot of that, and it's different based on different municipalities. A lot of that has gone away with this new reduced site plan control. That's also a big deal. I have a property right now. I'm $50,000 into studies. 50 grand into studies to build a sixplex. I started all that before this went through. If this would have went through, I could have saved that $50,000. It's a huge deal. So a lot of projects that didn't pencil before because they didn't make sense because they were too costly, too many development charges, too many site plan controls, that's gone away. If you've shelved a project in the past, you might want to bring it, you might want to consider it again, is what I'd have to say. Jose says, any concern with removing trees with this process? Some municipalities have extremely strict tree removal bylaws. Some of the coach homes, some of them, and that'll be part of their coach home bylaws, whether or not they are superseding those or not. I can't speak to that one. I know in Peterborough, it's not a concern. I know in Toronto, removing a limb off a tree can get you in jail. It's a joke, but you get the idea. So it's definitely something to look into. It's going to be municipality by municipality. And the last one that I would say is the financial calculation. You know, the cost itself, it really depends on the property itself. It really depends on the address. The site plan itself is really, really critical. Is it a nice flat backyard? What kind of soil is down there is critical to how much it's going to cost. So there's a lot of consideration. So give me a shout or let me know if if this is something you're considering. It's definitely something that if you have an actual property with an actual address, with an actual consideration, it's easy to look at, to do a sketch and say, here's what this thing can do for you. So you really need to look at each site individually. And I know for us at Visture and for our clients that we work with across Peterborough and Lindsay and Aurelia and Huntsville and into Oshawa, we are literally going property by property by property by property and making these calculations and seeing what's going to be the cost and what's going to be the return on investment. It's very simple. If the ROI is there, you're going to notice that this could be the absolute best use of capital. If the ROI is not there, it's no problem. It's no skin off your back. It didn't cost you anything. You move on. But I will say this, is every single one of you that buy any properties going forward, you have got to consider this and ask yourself, can I put a coach home on this property? Right? I am no longer buying a property that I can't fit a coach home on. It might be a great deal as a single family, and I might be able to duplex it. The question is, can I also add a coach home? If I can, could be a home run. If I can't, let's keep looking. So these are things for you guys to think about as you kind of continue your investment journey. And right now, given where we're at in the real estate market, there's some incredible opportunities. So it's really time to be digging in on this.